When I walked into my own living room and found strangers measuring my furniture, my daughter Kristen looked at me with cold eyes and said, "Mom, the movers are coming Friday. We've already picked out a lovely room for you at Sunrise Meadows." I stood there frozen, my grocery bags slipping from my fingers, oranges rolling across the floor I had mopped that very morning. My daughter, the little girl I had raised alone after her father walked out, the woman I had sacrificed everything for, was standing in my house with a real estate agent and talking about putting me in a nursing home, as casually as discussing the weather. I am Dorothy. I am 67 years old, and until that Tuesday afternoon in March, I believed my daughter loved me. The man with the measuring tape looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Kristen, then at me, clearly realizing something was very wrong. "Ma'am, I thought this property was vacant," the owner said. "I am the owner," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. "And I live here." Kristen stepped forward with that patronizing smile I had grown to dread. "Mom, we talked about this. You're getting confused. Remember? We discussed the assisted living facility last month. We had discussed nothing. This was the first I was hearing about any of it." "Kristen, what is happening here?" My son-in-law Marcus emerged from my kitchen, holding a folder of papers. He was wearing one of those expensive suits that I had probably paid for indirectly through all the money I had given them over the years. "Dorothy, let's all calm down. This is for your own good. You've been showing signs of cognitive decline, and we're just trying to protect you." Cognitive decline. I had completed the New York Times crossword puzzle that very morning in under 15 minutes. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "All of you. Now." The real estate agent practically ran out the door, muttering apologies, but Kristen and Marcus stayed, exchanging those looks that married couples share when they think they're smarter than everyone else in the room. "Mom, you're proving our point right now," Kristen said. "This irrational behavior, the paranoia, the hostility toward family members who are just trying to help. We've already consulted with a doctor." "What doctor?" "I never saw any doctor." "Dr. Patterson. He reviewed your case and agrees that you need supervised care." I had never heard of Dr. Patterson in my life. That night, after they finally left with vague threats about doing this the hard way, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to understand how I had gotten here. How had my own daughter become someone who would try to steal my home while I was buying groceries? The answer, I realized, was simple. I had spent 23 years teaching her that I would always put her needs before my own, and she had learned that lesson too well. Let me tell you about those 23 years. When Kristen's father left us for his secretary, she was 12 years old. I was 44, working as a hospital administrator, and suddenly a single mother with a mortgage I could barely afford. I swore to myself that Kristen would never feel the absence of her father. I would be both parents. I would give her everything. And I did. When she wanted to go to a private college that cost 4 times what the state university would have charged, I took out loans, $47,000 in parent loans that I would be paying off until I was 70. When she graduated and couldn't find a job in her field, I let her move back home. For 3 years, she lived with me rent-free while she figured things out. I paid for her car insurance, her phone, her credit card bills. When she met Marcus at 27 and he proposed within 6 months, I paid for the wedding, $32,000 for a single day. Marcus's family contributed nothing, claiming they had different priorities. When they bought their first house and needed help with the down payment, I gave them $20,000 from my retirement savings. It was supposed to be a loan. They never paid back a cent. When Marcus lost his job during the pandemic and they fell behind on their mortgage, I covered 3 months of payments. Another $8,000. When Kristen decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, even though they had no children, I continued to supplement their income so she wouldn't have to work. I calculated it once, on a sleepless night, about a year ago. The total came to $147,000 over 23 years, almost my entire retirement savings, given freely to a daughter who now wanted to lock me in a nursing home and sell my house. The irony was suffocating. The woman who couldn't pay her own mortgage was trying to take control of my assets because I was supposedly mentally incompetent. For 2 days after that confrontation, I heard nothing from Kristen. I thought perhaps she had come to her senses, realized how insane her plan was, and decided to drop it. I should have known better. On Thursday morning, I received a certified letter. It was a petition for emergency guardianship, filed in county court, claiming that I was suffering from severe cognitive impairment and was incapable of managing my own affairs. The petition requested that Kristen be appointed as my legal guardian with full control over my finances, my property, and my medical decisions. The supporting documents included a statement from the mysterious Dr. Patterson, who claimed to have evaluated me through collateral information provided by concerned family members. He diagnosed me with probable early-stage dementia without ever meeting me. There was a statement from Marcus describing incidents of my erratic behavior, including an alleged time when I got lost driving to their house. I had taken a different route to avoid construction. A time when I forgot Kristen's birthday, I had called her 2 days early by accident, and a time when I left the stove on the pilot light had gone out, which is a mechanical problem, not a memory problem. There was even a statement from my neighbor, Gerald Hoffman, who had apparently told them that I seemed confused and withdrawn lately. Gerald and I had barely spoken in 15 years. He was bitter about a fence dispute from back when my husband was still around. The court date was set for 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to prove that I was not insane. 2 weeks to fight for my own life. I spent that first night, after receiving the letter, in a state of shock. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I kept reading the documents over and over, looking at my daughter's signature on the petition, trying to reconcile this act of betrayal with the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The shock had burned away, and in its place was a cold, clear anger. They thought I was a confused old woman who would simply surrender. They were wrong. My first call was to a lawyer named Patricia Holloway, who specialized in elder law. I found her through the State Bar Association's referral service, specifically searching for attorneys who handled guardianship defense. "Mrs. Brennan," she said after I had explained my situation, "what you're describing is unfortunately more common than people realize. It's called predatory guardianship, when family members try to gain legal control over an elderly person's assets under the guise of protection. Can they actually do this? Can they just decide I'm incompetent and take everything? They can try. But we're going to make sure they fail. The first thing we need is an independent psychiatric evaluation. I work with a forensic psychiatrist named Dr. Elena Voss, who is excellent in these cases. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" I could, and I would. That afternoon, I did something I should have done years ago. I went to my bank and spoke with the branch manager about protecting my accounts. I discovered something alarming. 3 months earlier, Kristen had been added as a joint account holder on my savings account. I had no memory of authorizing this. "Mrs. Brennan, you signed the paperwork yourself," the manager said, showing me the form. The signature looked like mine, but I knew I had never signed it. "Your daughter brought you in on. Let me check. November 14th. I had been in Philadelphia that entire week, visiting my sister, who was recovering from hip surgery. I had the plane tickets, the hotel receipts, my sister's medical records showing I was listed as her emergency contact during her hospital stay. My daughter had forged my signature. I left the bank with printed statements showing every transaction on that joint account. Over the past 3 months, Kristen had transferred $18,000 from my savings into an account I didn't have access to. The next morning, Patricia Holloway looked at the evidence and shook her head slowly. "Mrs. Brennan, this changes everything. This isn't just predatory guardianship. This is elder financial abuse. And given the forged signature, it may be criminal fraud." "I don't want my daughter to go to prison," I said, surprising myself with the words. Despite everything, there was still a part of me that remembered holding her as a baby, walking her to her first day of school, watching her graduate from college. Patricia nodded. "That's your choice to make. But right now, our priority is protecting you. We need to document everything, get that psychiatric evaluation, and prepare for the hearing." Dr. Voss evaluated me over the course of 3 hours. She administered memory tests, reasoning tests, questioned me about my daily life, my finances, my relationships. At the end, she looked at me with a slight smile. "Mrs. Brennan, your cognitive function is well above average for your age group. In fact, your processing speed and verbal reasoning put you in the 92nd percentile. You show no signs of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other cognitive impairment." I let out a breath. I hadn't realized I was holding. "Can you put that in writing for the court?" "I'll do better than that. I'll testify in person." As I prepared for the hearing, I found unexpected allies in surprising places. My neighbor, Rosa Sandoval, whom I had known casually for years from our conversations over the backyard fence, became my fierce defender. When she heard what Kristen was trying to do, she was outraged. "Dorothy, I see you every single day. I watch you tend your garden, walk to the mailbox, drive your car. You're sharper than people half your age. What your daughter is doing is criminal." She recruited 3 other neighbors to write statements on my behalf, all testifying to my mental clarity and independence. My former colleagues from the hospital, where I had worked for 31 years before retiring, rallied around me. My old friend Helen Parker, who still worked in the administration, gathered 7 character references from people who had worked with me, all attesting to my competence and sound judgment. Most importantly, I found an unexpected ally in my sister's daughter, my niece Jennifer. Jennifer was a paralegal who had worked in a firm specializing in elder law before transitioning to corporate work. She drove down from Philadelphia to help me organize my case. "Aunt Dorothy, I've seen cases like this before," Jennifer said as we sat together reviewing documents. "The key is showing a pattern of exploitation, not just this guardianship attempt. We need to establish that Kristen has been systematically taking advantage of you for years, and that this petition is just the next step in that pattern." Together, we built a timeline. Every check I had written to Kristen and Marcus, every loan that was never repaid, every request for money that came wrapped in guilt and obligation, the forged bank signature, the fraudulent transfers. The pattern was undeniable. A week before the hearing, Kristen called me for the first time since serving the papers. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom." Her voice was soft, almost pleading. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. "I think this has all gotten out of hand. Maybe we can talk and work things out." "Work things out how, Kristen?" "Well, Marcus and I were thinking, if you would just agree to let us help manage your finances, we wouldn't need to go through the courts. You could stay in your house. We would just oversee things. Make sure you're taken care of." "Oversee my bank accounts, you mean? The ones you've already been stealing from?" Silence on the line. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about the $18,000 you transferred out of my savings. I'm talking about the signature you forged on November 14th when I was in Philadelphia with my sister. I'm talking about the doctor you somehow got to diagnose me without ever meeting me." More silence. Then, carefully, "Mom, you're confused. This is exactly why we're worried about you. You're imagining things that didn't happen." I felt something snap inside me, a final breaking of the chain that had bound me to her for so many years. "Kristen, I have bank records, I have plane tickets, I have hotel receipts, I have witnesses, and I have a psychiatrist who is going to testify that there is nothing wrong with my mind." "What psychiatrist? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I'm going to fight this, and I'm going to win, and when I do, I want you to know something." I paused, letting the silence build. "You taught me that I only help family members who treat me like family. You and Marcus have not treated me like family. You have treated me like a bank, and this bank is permanently closed." I hung up before she could respond. The hearing was held on a gray Tuesday morning in a courtroom that smelled of old coffee and dusty files. Kristen and Marcus arrived with their attorney, a slick-looking man in his 50s who seemed confident that this would be a quick, easy victory. I arrived with Patricia Holloway, Dr. Voss, and a folder containing 147 pages of documentation. The judge was a woman in her 60s, named Catherine Webb. She had a reputation for being thorough and no-nonsense. I had researched her before the hearing and felt cautiously optimistic. Kristen's attorney presented their case first. He painted a picture of a loving daughter desperately concerned about her mother's declining mental health. He cited the statement from Dr. 2040 Patterson the allegations of erratic behavior, the testimony from Gerald Hoffman. When he finished, Judge Webb turned to us. "Miss Holloway, your response." Patricia stood. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of a concerned daughter. It is a case of systematic elder financial abuse spanning more than 2 decades, culminating in an attempt to gain legal control over a competent elderly woman's assets through fraud and deception." She laid out the evidence methodically. The $147,000 I had given over the years, the forged bank signature, the fraudulent transfers, the fact that Dr. Patterson had diagnosed me without ever conducting an examination, the plane tickets and hotel receipts proving I was in Philadelphia when I supposedly signed the bank paperwork. Then Dr. Voss testified. She walked the court through her evaluation, explaining each test she had administered and what the results showed. Mrs. Brennan is a highly intelligent, cognitively intact individual. There is absolutely no basis for a finding of mental incapacity. The judge then called Dr. Patterson to explain how he had made his diagnosis. Dr. Patterson, it turned out, was a general practitioner who had received his medical degree from a Caribbean school with questionable accreditation. He admitted under questioning that he had never met me, never examined me, and had based his diagnosis entirely on information provided by Kristen. "Doctor, is it standard medical practice to diagnose dementia without ever examining the patient?" Patricia asked. "In some circumstances, collateral information can be sufficient. Is it standard practice, yes or no?" "No." The neighbors testified, one after another. Rosa described our daily conversations about gardening, news, and neighborhood events. She described watching me manage contractors during my kitchen renovation last year, negotiating prices and reviewing contracts with complete competence. Helen Parker testified about my 31 years of exemplary service at the hospital, my reputation for detail-oriented work, my continued mental sharpness in the years since retirement. Jennifer presented the financial timeline, showing how Kristen's requests for money had escalated over the years, always accompanied by guilt and emotional manipulation. When it was Kristen's turn to testify, Patricia's cross-examination was devastating. "Mrs. Wallace, when was the last time you visited your mother without asking her for money?" Kristen looked at Marcus, then back at Patricia. "I don't keep track of things like that." "Would you say it's been weeks? Months? Years?" "We visit regularly." "When was the last visit where you didn't request financial assistance?" Silence. "Mrs. Wallace, can you explain how your mother's signature appeared on bank documents dated November 14th when she was in Philadelphia visiting her sister?" "I don't know. Maybe she came back early. Maybe she's confused about the dates." Patricia introduced the plane tickets, the hotel receipts, the sister's medical records. "Your aunt has confirmed that your mother was with her in Philadelphia for the entire week of November 11th through 18th. Are you saying all of these documents are fabricated?" Kristen's composure cracked. "I don't know how this happened. Maybe someone at the bank made a mistake. A mistake where someone forged your mother's signature and added you to her accounts, allowing you to transfer $18,000 into an account only you controlled." Marcus leaned forward and whispered something to their attorney. Their attorney shook his head. "Mrs. Wallace, what was your intention for the proceeds from the sale of your mother's house?" "We were going to use it to pay for her care at the nursing facility. Sunrise Meadows Assisted Living charges $3,400 per month for a private room. Your mother's house is valued at approximately $380,000. That would pay for over 9 years of care. Was your mother's prognosis that she would need 9 years of intensive assisted living?" Kristen had no answer. Judge Webb called a recess, then returned after 45 minutes with her decision. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, she said, "This court finds no basis for the appointment of a guardian for Dorothy Brennan. Mrs. Brennan has demonstrated clear mental capacity through professional psychiatric evaluation and through the testimony of multiple witnesses who interact with her regularly." I felt tears welling in my eyes, but I held them back. It wasn't over yet. Furthermore, the judge continued, "This court is deeply troubled by the evidence of financial exploitation presented by the defense. The forged bank documents, the unauthorized transfers, and the fraudulent medical diagnosis suggest a pattern of elder abuse that may warrant criminal investigation. Kristen went pale. I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for review. Additionally, I am issuing a protective order prohibiting Kristen Wallace and Marcus Wallace from contacting Dorothy Brennan without her explicit consent. She looked directly at Kristen. Mrs. Wallace, I want to be very clear. What you attempted to do to your mother is among the most reprehensible things one family member can do to another. You tried to strip a competent woman of her autonomy and her assets. The only reason you are not facing immediate charges is that this is a civil hearing. That may change. She banged her gavel. Case dismissed. Outside the courthouse, Rosa hugged me tight. Dorothy, I am so proud of you. You stood up for yourself. Patricia shook my hand. It's not over, you know. The DA's office will likely want to speak with you about pressing charges. I nodded. I'll think about it. In the end, I chose not to pursue criminal charges. Not for Kristen's sake, but for my own. I didn't want to spend the next year of my life in courtrooms, reliving this nightmare over and over, but I did take action to protect myself. I removed Kristen from all my accounts. I changed my will, leaving everything to a combination of my niece Jennifer, the hospital where I had worked for so many years, and a charity that helps elderly people fight exactly this kind of abuse. I installed a security system in my home. I updated all my legal documents with Patricia's firm, and I stopped giving money to people who didn't appreciate it. 3 months after the hearing, I received a letter from Marcus and Kristen's mortgage company. They were facing foreclosure. Without my financial support, they couldn't afford their lifestyle. A week later, Kristen called. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, I know you're angry, but please, we're about to lose our house. You have to help us. I'm your daughter. You can't just abandon us like this. I listened to the message once, then deleted it. She called again the next day, and the next. Each message became more desperate, more accusatory. I was cruel. I was heartless. I was punishing her for something that wasn't her fault. On the 4th day, I finally called back. Kristen, I need to tell you something, and then I need you to listen. Mom, thank God. I knew you would. I said, listen. My voice was calm. I had practiced this. For 23 years, I gave you everything you asked for and more. I bankrupted my retirement to fund your lifestyle. And when I finally said no, you tried to have me declared insane so you could take what was left. Mom, I'm not finished. You asked me why I can't help you now. Here's my answer. I have learned that you only treat me like a mother when you need money. When the checks stop, you treat me like an obstacle. And I'm not interested in being used anymore. So you're just going to let your only daughter lose her house? You're going to let yourself lose your house. I'm not part of this equation anymore. You're 43 years old, Kristen. You have a master's degree. Your husband has an MBA. You are capable of supporting yourselves. You simply never had to because I was always there to rescue you. Mom, please. The answer is no, and it will always be no. I wish you well, Kristen. I genuinely do. But I will not be your financial safety net anymore. I hung up and turned off my phone. That was 8 months ago. I have heard from mutual acquaintances that Kristen and Marcus lost the house. They moved to a small apartment across town. Marcus finally got a job after years of consulting that never seemed to produce income. Kristen, for the first time in 15 years, went back to work. I don't know if they think about me. I don't know if Kristen ever reflects on what she did, if she ever feels remorse or shame. Part of me hopes she does. Part of me has stopped caring. What I do know is that my life is better now than it has been in decades. I travel. Last month I took a 3-week trip to Italy with Rosa and Helen, my 2 closest friends. We ate pasta in Rome, toured vineyards in Tuscany, and got hopelessly lost in Venice. I laughed more in those 3 weeks than I had in the previous 3 years. I volunteer at the senior center, helping other elderly people understand their legal rights, recognize the signs of financial exploitation, and find resources to protect themselves. Every month, I meet someone in a situation similar to mine, someone whose children or grandchildren see them as nothing more than a source of money. I help them find the strength to say no. I garden. My backyard is a riot of color now, filled with roses and hydrangeas and tomato plants that actually produce tomatoes instead of being neglected while I worried about Kristen's problems. I spend time with Jennifer, who has become more like a daughter to me than my actual daughter ever was. We have dinner together every Sunday. She asks about my week, my health, my happiness. She never asks for money. Last week I ran into Gerald Hoffman, the neighbor who had testified against me. He apologized, sheepishly, admitting that Kristen had caught him at a weak moment and he hadn't really known what he was signing. Dorothy. I had no idea what she was planning. I'm sorry. I accepted his apology. Life is too short for grudges against people who were simply manipulated. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the little girl Kristen used to be, the one who made me Mother's Day cards out of construction paper and glitter, the one who told me I was the best mom in the whole world. I mourn that child. I grieve for the relationship we might have had if I had raised her differently, if I had taught her that love is not measured in dollars. But I don't grieve for long, because I have finally learned something that took me 67 years to understand. You cannot buy love, and you should never have to. My name is Dorothy. I am 67 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important investment I can make is in myself. If you enjoyed my story, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear about your experiences. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who only saw you as a source of money? What gave you the strength to say no? And if you haven't found that strength yet, know this: it's never too late. I found mine at 67. You can find yours too. For more stories like this one, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. There are so many of us out there, and we're stronger when we share our stories. With heartfelt warmth, until next time, this is Auntie Maeve.